Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be a Game Week 1 Mo plus Erling draft structure. And the way this works, of course, is this is the template that I think captures captaincies the absolute best in Game Weeks 1 to 6. However, of course, a lot of people have already moved into, considering a Haaland only structure, or maybe more specifically, a Salah only structure, given that Liverpool's starting fixtures are so good. And given Haaland's price rise, it is justifiable, in my opinion, this season that we have a lot of variety for the drafts. And I think that's beautiful because that shows that the pricing has worked out and a lot of people have different opinions on the different draft structures. The advantages of this draft structure, in my opinion, are definitely maximizing theoretically on the captaincy. So the way it'll work is on match day 2 or match day 3. Man City have much better fixtures, specifically on match day 2, right? That Ipswich fixture is key in comparison to, let's say, Liverpool's fixtures. And of course, if you're going for this structure, you will be maximizing captaincies theoretically. The issue, of course, is the sort of opportunity cost of this draft. Either you cut down a little bit more on your premium defense, or you also ensure that you cannot have, let's say, a Saka plus Son plus Palmer. So I think that is a quite significant opportunity cost, and a lot of people definitely have thought about whether that's valuable to them or not. I still think that you can create a great draft here with Salah plus Haaland, but you also have to realize that, unfortunately, it does lack, in my opinion, a little bit of depth, or you're creating too much depth with players that are slightly weaker than, let's say, your conventional stronger, more stable 6.5 sort of million midfielders, maybe even 7.5, that sort of price range. So you're sort of living in the budget territory and sort of understanding as well that your captaincy points will hopefully hold out and you might be able to maximize over people who've just gone for the one sole premium. The way this will work, of course, as I said, with captaincies is just simply, you can probably roll the dice on many game weeks. I think Liverpool is quite a clear Salah captaincy. Haaland is a match day 2 captaincy. Every week after that, with exception to match day 5, when Man City face off versus Arsenal, I would say is a pretty big toss-up of a 50-50, arguably. And so it's really up to you how you want to maximize around that. More than likely, Haaland could be a differential because it seems like a lot of Salah-only drafts are quite popular right now. So for match day 5, whilst that's the Salah captaincy, you could very well go wherever the way you want between Haaland and Salah on those other game weeks. So up to you guys as to how you choose to sort of maximize based on this approach. Another sort of announcement that I'd like to make right now is that I've re-signed with Fantasy Football Hub for the 24-25 season. So we'll be using a lot of the Opta stats and data tools for our cheat sheets and all sorts of content as well, which include the transfer plan videos as soon as the season starts. And even, for example, for this video, we'll be doing a little bit of an AI draft rating later, and I'll be discussing how the sort of AI rating works and working that with you later down the line. Now, let's just quickly get started with the draft. In defense, we're actually going with a Crystal Palace goalkeeper. The reason why we've moved away from a Chelsea goalkeeper in the meantime is because there's a lot of uncertainty around the Chelsea goalkeeper. It seems like Chelsea's actively involved in the market for buying another goalkeeper, and whilst the news is still that Sanchez is starting as a goalkeeper, a lot of the news around Chelsea right now, or surrounding Chelsea and Sanchez, is the idea that they want to sign a goalkeeper who is going to push Sanchez. And I really think that, unfortunately, in those cases, you're putting a lot of doubt into Sanchez as a pick for Game Week 1. Because if you're signing a good enough goalkeeper to sort of replace him, I feel like there's going to be opportunities where even before the end of Game Week 6, you might see Sanchez out of the team. And that could very well happen. It's happened before. As far as why I've gone for a Crystal Palace goalkeeper who arguably have the same situation, the issue, I suppose, here is I think it's either going to be a case where Johnson comes back into the team from surgery, from injury, and starts, or Henderson, the much younger player and the player that they've actually spent quite a fair amount on, will continue to start, given the fact that he ended the season very well and shouldn't really be, a goalkeeper in question. So I really feel like with Crystal Palace, I think there's a little bit more certainty there in terms of, who's going to start the season and who's going to continue playing and who's going to be the backup goalkeeper. So that's just my opinion. You might disagree, and I think that's fine. If you disagree, I think Nottingham Forest goalkeepers make a lot of sense. Even going for the Chelsea goalkeeper makes a lot of sense at the start of the season, looking towards, of course, a 4.5 goalkeeper. Those are just my thoughts. And in the defensive positions, the players that I've actually gone with right now are Konsa and Mikolenko as their sort of budget defenders. Now, Burn is interesting as well. However, I still think that we did sort of trend the last season off thinking that Newcastle were a pretty bad defense. And I don't think suddenly, even though Pope might be back in the team, or even Botman might be recovering from injury, that they'll suddenly move into a new echelon of defense. Now, you can make the same argument for Konsa as well, someone who, after losing, for example, their defensive mid in Kamara, at one point in the season. They definitely did look much worse. They have also lost Douglas Luiz, but I think what's nice about Aston Villa is the fixtures are definitively better than Newcastle's if you consider the full span of the first 6 fixtures compared to, let's say, Newcastle, where of course the fixtures are amazing to start with, and I still think that they're slightly worse as a defense compared to Aston Villa, particularly looking at a lot of the data metrics like expected goals conceded, and that's just my general sentiment right now. The way it also works too is that Mykolenko ultimately played for a very, very strong defense last season. He only sort of missed out on key minutes due to the injury that he suffered, which also seemed to prevail over the Euro, so hopefully he gets to start the season. Alternatively, of course, we have Crystal Palace defenders, Newcastle defenders that are very interesting in those sort of 4.5 price points. Harwood Bellis just simply as a rotation piece. I also like that Harwood Bellis has a good fixture in game week 2. So when you notice that Konsa and Mykolenko actually don't have a great fixture there, and that's a little bit of an issue with the squad, Harwood Bellis comes into the team and he basically plugs in a gap there, which I really, really like in terms of the sort of rotation of all these defenders. With Guardiola and Alexander-Arnold, I feel like for the first 5 game weeks, very easily you can actually play them. Guardiola does unfortunately play versus Arsenal, and that might be an issue. So you might look to that as an opportunity to maybe move away from Guardiola at that point in time in the season. But I feel like starting the season with him does make sense. He is someone who's going to be involved in the Man City preseason, which I think lends to really good minutes at the start of the season, which I think is the main concern that people have over Guardiola. As far as Trent, the fixtures are just incredible for Liverpool, and I still think that Robertson unfortunately has issues with, let's say, the guarantees of minutes, particularly under a new manager, and of course considering his age, as well as, let's say, Van Dijk. I do think that there is an upgrade here with Alexander-Arnold that is worth it despite the 1 million difference in price. As far as the midfield, if we move on closely to that, we've gone for Salah, Eze, and Nkunku to begin with, and Semenyo, right? These are players that I featured within my first draft, and I really don't think that I have differing opinions on these sorts of players. I think Eze just is at a ridiculous price point. He has a lot of bonuses gained from the new sort of BPS changes, right? Shots on target, definitely something he does. Fouls drawn, definitely something he does as well. As far as Salah, nothing has really changed here. He also benefits via just shots on target. And Nkunku, great player, as long as he starts the season, as long as he starts with his Chelsea team consistently, even if he plays 75 minutes a game, I just think he's a steal. As far as Semenyo, as I've mentioned before, moving from forward to mid is very nice. I also think we should contextualize Bournemouth as a very, very strong mid-table team now. So whilst people tend to look at Bournemouth as a little bit of a weaker team, I think despite their fixtures being a little bit tougher, you also have to expect that their attack is much better than, let's say, Nottingham Forest's attack, which traditionally, when you look at the underlying stats for Nottingham Forest, a lot of the attacking metrics are actually focused around someone like Chris Wood, who is their main talisman. And at the same time, some of the other stats go towards someone like Morgan Gibbs-White, who's a bit more of their creative player and outlet when it comes to the set pieces. When you look at players like Hudson-Odoi, when you look at Elanga, yes, of course, they've all had great sort of goal and assist tallies, but the underlying stats still seem to be a little bit inferior compared to, let's say, someone like Antoine Semenyo, which is why I like Semenyo so much. He also benefits from the shots on target metric and also fouls drawn, so that's really nice for Semenyo. And Mateus Franca is just a 4.5 midfielder. It seems like Palace will probably try to sign a new, maybe left-sided midfielder, and that could of course impact whether Franca starts the season. This 4.5 position is a little bit shaky right now, and I completely understand that. You might want to go for someone like Winks, who will just have the minutes 100%, or you might want to go for someone like, I don't know, Bergvall, if you're very interested in how quickly he can acclimate himself towards, let's say, the Tottenham team, and that's fine. As far as the forwards, moving on to that, I've gone for Haaland, Isak, and Wood. So this actually suggests, of course, that this structure is going to be a 3-4-3. Haaland, Isak, Wood are all very stable picks in my opinion. Wood probably the shakiest. I'll talk about Haaland and Isak first. It seems like Callum Wilson, he has maybe another injury or surgery that has been done. The doubt around whether he can start the season seems to be once again fully in place, and this is no different to, I would say, the career of Callum Wilson. Unfortunately, he is usually in and out of the pitch quite often. Isak, as a younger player, someone who will close out the season with very good minutes, very good fitness, I'm very confident in him as a pick. And of course, with Callum Wilson out, you're guaranteeing that he becomes a penalty taker for the team, which I think is lovely. As far as Haaland, there's not much to be really said about him. He didn't play within the European Championships, which just means that he will be ready for the entire preseason for Man City, and that's very lovely. As far as Chris Wood, it seems like Taiwo Awoniyi has been taken out of the sort of preseason training camp for Nottingham Forest, so it seems like early doors Chris Wood minutes will be nailed. And whilst Nottingham Forest are looking for another striker, I feel like that could be more of a backup for Chris Wood and maybe even a replacement for Taiwo Awoniyi, unfortunately, just because he's also struggled to sort of stay consistently on the pitch and be available. Unfortunately, he's suffered from a lot of injury issues. It also seems like he might have a mental issue as well, which obviously I hope he's able to deal with, but that just means that Chris Wood is a little bit better as a pick as we start to look at game week 1 and how impactful some picks are. A lot of people will also be asking why and where is João Pedro? Now, João Pedro, for whatever reason, was removed from Brighton's training camp. And so, unfortunately, it seems like with João Pedro potentially being out of the team for the preseason training camp, he might not be ready for game week 1. And for that reason, I've removed João Pedro from this draft just to make sure that this draft is as impervious as it could possibly get for the time being. So that's why we've gone for this draft structure in the end. Now, in terms of game week 1, in terms of how you'd line up this team, unfortunately, of course, with the way that this structure works, it's basically a 3-4-3. So you're effectively just playing, let's say, Mykolenko, I would say, who is a great fixture in game week 1, benching Konsa, which is a little bit sad, but I think Mykolenko still is better for the purposes of game week 1. You're playing Guardiola and Trent. You will play, of course, the Crystal Palace goalkeeper, and the midfield and the forward line stays basically intact as a 3-4-3. In game week 2, of course, if we find out that Matheus Franca continuously starts for Crystal Palace, you can definitely insert him into the team in game week 2, and he'll be an interesting option from there. As I said with captaincies, we've already discussed that at the start of the video. So let's just quickly look at the sort of AI draft rating feature from Fantasy Football Hub. So what I've done now is I've loaded up my draft, and the only change that I've actually made compared to the actual video is that Johnston has replaced Henderson here. And that's simply because from looking at Hub's projected data, which I get as a premium user, I can look that I can basically see that Johnston has been predicted to be the goalkeeper, the starting goalkeeper for Crystal Palace. So to ensure that this draft is sort of fairly rated, I've made sure that Johnson is the starting goalkeeper. My personal opinions is that Henderson is probably going to be the starting goalkeeper, but I'm sure we'll get some clarity. And of course, the Hub sort of model will update itself based on whatever information we get from the manager later down the line. So for the most part, this is a 14 out of 15. The only change is just the keeper from the exact same club that is, and no changes. So let's just quickly press analyze my team. And what's nice about this feature is that what I've done is I've also pre-uploaded my screenshot. So you don't need to even enter your ID. You don't need to log into anything. You can just analyze your team from the start here. And the link will be in the description. So I just click on analyze my team. Then my team gets rated and it's a 92 out of 100. Now, when I look at this draft, I think what I can do as a premium user is sort of see who are the players that seemingly have less projected minutes or less projected, for example, expected points compared to my expectations. It seems like when I went through actually evaluating the data itself, it seemed like Nkunku had less sort of points outputs or expected points that I would expect. And part of that might be that the model is exercising a little bit of caution, right? Nkunku is someone who didn't feature too much last season. We might not be 100% sure that he's going to play a lot of minutes this season. It seems like Semenyo was really fairly rated. Players like Konsa, Mykolenko definitely are predicted to start, Johnson as well, as I mentioned, and the rest of the team seems to be fairly strong. So the position that seems very weak in my draft right now is probably that Nkunku position. And of course, if I want to, I can obviously ask the AI to suggest for more transfers, and I can get some more insight there myself. But that's the sort of new feature from Fantasy Football Hub. Really nice, of course, that they've implemented this sort of screenshot feature. Makes it so much easier for new users to use it. And that's just a little bit of a briefing on the sort of AI feature. But that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the Haaland plus Salah draft. Tell me if you're actually going for a Haaland plus Salah draft, or if you're going for, let's say, a Haaland only draft instead, or a Salah only draft as well, like I am currently considering under my first draft. And have the João Pedro sort of training injury potential sort of rumor around his sort of preseason exclusion change your draft? Let me know as well. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.